Hello and welcome to my channel. In this lecture we'll be discussing the hypothalamus, so let's begin. The hypothalamus is the region below the thalamus, as the name implies. This is the region of the hypothalamus here, and this is the subthalamus. We studied this before with the diencephalon. The hypothalamus, for more details about it, it's a neuroendocrine organ that regulates many functions like fluid and food consumption, temperature control, sleep-wake cycle, growth and reproduction. So it has many functions. It's a vital organ there. The boundaries anteriorly by lamina terminalis, superiorly by the hypothalamic sulcus. You see that? This is the hypothalamic sulcus, separating it from the thalamus. Posteriorly by the tegmentum of the midbrain. This is the midbrain here. And laterally by what's so-called the substantia innominata, means the substance that has no name. It's a series of layers of gray and white matters lie above the anterior part of the thalamus and lentiform nucleus. Lies below the anterior part of the thalamus and lentiform nucleus. This substantia innominata is rostral, and the posterior limb of the internal capsule is caudal. So the hypothalamus, as we mentioned before, it forms the floor and lateral walls of the third ventricle. And we studied this in details with the ventricles of the brain. The connections with pituitary gland. This is the pituitary gland here, and this is the pituitary stalk, and this region is called the infundibulum. It's connected to the pituitary gland by the infundibulum and hypophyseal stalk, caudal to optic chiasm and to the portal circulation. Remember the portal circulation we studied when we studied the blood supply of the brain, the superior hypophyseal artery and inferior hypophyseal arteries. Remember that? The factors produced by the hypothalamus are releasing and inhibitory factors that release or inhibits the release of the hormones from the pituitary gland. They pass through the tuberoinfundibular tract. See, this is the tuberoinfundibular tract. To the hypothalamic hypophyseal portal circulation to reach the anterior pituitary, and also connected through the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract by nerve fibers originating in the supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei. This is the supraoptic nucleus here and the paraventricular nucleus here, because of course of the bidimensional plane of the drawings. You'll not be able to appreciate the relationship between the different nuclei of the hypothalamus, so sorry about that. So it connects through the tuberoinfundibular tract and the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract to posterior pituitary, to be precise. This is the posterior pituitary region. The functional divisions of the hypothalamus. They divided the hypothalamus according to the function of its nuclei by a parasagittal plane into medial and lateral zones, and divided by the coronal plane into preoptic and periventricular zones. Preoptic means around the chiasma, optic chiasma, and periventricular zones means in the wall or around the third ventricle. The lateral zone, in the lateral zone, there is a large bundle of axons that form the what's so called the medial forebrain bundle. It connects with the septal nuclei. Septal nuclei is the area of the cortex near the lamina terminalis, and the other nuclei in the brainstem. The axons of the lateral nucleus enter the medial forebrain bundle and function in promoting feeding behavior. Other nuclei are the tuberal group, axons of which make connections with the anterior pituitary through the tuberoinfundibular tract we saw in the previous plate to regulate the release of the pituitary hormones. The medial zone, it's divided into three regions: the supraoptic, the tuberal and mammillary. The supraoptic region, nuclei involved in thermoregulation and osmoregulation and sleep-wake cycle. This thermoregulation center, when affected by toxins produced by invading organisms like bacteria or viruses, that's why we get fever. And also involved, as I said, in osmoregulation, in the concentration, regulating the concentration of different electrolytes in the body fluids, and the sleep-wake cycle, because there is a connection with the optic tract and the optic nerve. Optic tract, I mean, and chiasma to the nuclei of the hypothalamus for detection of day and night. That's why we have sleep-wake cycle. And during the sleep-wake cycle, the hormones are changing levels from high to low according to the function of each hormone. Supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei synthesize antidiuretic hormone or vasopressin. From its name, it's against diuresis, means it preserves the body fluids and stimulates water uptake when the blood pressure goes down. And oxytocin hormone, as we studied before, it's responsible for ejection of milk from breasts and for uterine contractions. And remember, if there is a difference between ejection of milk and formation of milk, the formation of milk is carried out by prolactin hormone, not the oxytocin. Oxytocin, it has affects contractility of the structure it works upon, like the walls of the lactiferous ducts, for example, in the breast, and the uterine walls. Also, axons of the supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei pass through the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract, as you can see here, to the posterior pituitary. Actually, the hormones are formed up here, and then they go down the nerve fibers to be stored in the posterior pituitary and released from there. That's why sometimes they consider them as neurotransmitters. It passed through the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract to a posterior pituitary. Another group is the suprachiasmatic nucleus. From its name, it's above the optic chiasma and receive direct input from retina to regulate the light and dark cycle. This is called the circadian rhythms of hormone release. Also, the anterior nucleus is another group that regulates the body temperature. The tubular region contains three nuclei: the ventromedial, the dorsomedial, and arcuate nuclei. Largest is the ventromedial, which functions as satiety center to decrease feeding behavior, and affection of this center leads to hyperphagia, eating non-stop. Also, the dorsomedial nucleus functions in the behavioral expression of rage and aggressive behavior. It's responsible for this kind of behavior. The arcuate nucleus is a center for releasing hormones, which are transmitted by the tuberoinfundibular tract, as we mentioned before, and hypophyseal portal system to the anterior pituitary. The mammillary body, which we studied before in the floor of the third ventricle, receives the fornix, as you'll know now. It has a nuclei, medial, intermediate, and lateral nuclei, and posterior hypothalamic nuclei. The medial mammillary nucleus receives the commissural fornix. The fornix is a commissural type of commissural fibers coming from the hippocampal formation in the temporal lobe in the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. And it precisely originates from a region called the subiculum of the hippocampal formation, and involved in memory, as we will study in the limbic system. It's also connected to the limbic system. The periventricular zone, it's medial to the medial zone and adjacent to the ependymal cells of third ventricle. Neurons synthesize the releasing hormones, and axons pass through the tuberoinfundibular tract to the hypophyseal portal system. These were little details about the hypothalamus to be able to understand its functions. I hope you got the maximum benefit from this lecture, and thank you very much for watching.